Hi, and welcome back for the next set of videos for the front-end developer training. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and use all of the things that we talked about and set up in the first two sets of videos to create a theme together. So we talked about earlier that we can create modules for front-end development. So we talked about themes, we talked about layout templates, okay? So what we'll do here is we will start by creating some themes, and then in the next set of videos, we'll create some layout templates together as well, okay? Now, themes are one of the main modules that we can create for our front-end development. This gives us our global styling. We can go ahead and modify the HTML, the CSS, the JavaScript of our entire site where we've added the theme, and we can also do some configuration in there as well, which we'll go ahead and look at in this section here. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive right in. All right, so like I said, what we can do is we can generate a new theme together, a theme module, where we can control sort of the global styling for our entire site where we've added our theme. And what we're going to do is we're going to go and use the tools that we've downloaded and set up earlier, okay, to do just that. We can rapidly generate our theme project, get some changes, deploy those changes, and go on from there, okay? So if you haven't already set up the Liferay theme generator, make sure to check out the first two sets of videos to go through the steps to set up our Liferay theme generator, as well as look at some of the technologies that we have available to us out of the box in Liferay. Okay, so what you can see here is we have the ability to create some different packages or do some different things using the Liferay theme generator. Okay, we can create a Liferay theme package or project. We can create a Liferay layout project, as well as a Liferay themelet, and we'll talk about themelets a little bit later on. Okay, we also have the ability to import themes from the previous SDK that we had available to us. So if you're coming back from a previous version of Liferay, maybe you've already built a theme before, you can actually go ahead and import the project into our NPM setup here, okay? Or you can go ahead and import an existing source into the NPM setup here into our deploy process, okay? So we're gonna go ahead and build a theme together, okay? And what we'll actually see here is that our themes are similar to previous versions of Liferay as well, okay? So for those of you who have some experience, you may have seen this before, okay? In the older version of Liferay themes, when you generated the theme project, there was a diffs folder, okay, as well as the base theme. All right. What we have now is a distinction between the build, which includes the base theme, and the source. Okay. Now, a base theme basically gives us a starting point for our theme development. Okay. So there are two main base themes. There is the unstyled and there is the styled. Okay. The unstyled and the styled will differ basically with some basic CSS styling included. So the unstyled will just give us our HTML scaffolding. The styled, which we will be using to start it, is the default base theme, also includes what's known as clay base. Okay. Now clay base is essentially the set of styles for the clay implementation that we talked about in the second set of videos. Okay, so we'll see all of this in action as we continue on. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and break down these next few sections by creating a theme and looking at the different aspect of the theme. So we'll start with HTML, we'll go to CSS, look at JavaScript, we'll do some configuration, etc. Okay, so to start, what you can see here is that we have the portal normal FTL file as the main HTML source file. So that's where we're starting, okay? Now this breaks down pretty easily into three major sections within the wrapper div, and I'll actually open this up and work through this with you. We'll build a theme together and look at some of these source files. Okay, but the portal normal includes a banner section, a content section, and a footer section, okay? Now, the banner, content, and footer are pretty simple to understand, as we will see when we create our theme. The banner section includes a lot of those top header sections in a Liferay site. We have the logo, site name, page title, sign-in link, navigation, etc. And we'll see what that looks like in the actual file here in a second. The content section is going to primarily include whatever is needed for the portlet styling or the widgets on the page. Okay, so the way in which they are displayed on the page, and we'll look at that a little bit later as well. Okay, and it's also going to include the layout, and we'll see that as well. Typically, this section is not modified too much by developers, simply because if you modify this, it will change the way that Liferay handles the way portlets are displayed and the drag and drop. Okay, so for you experienced developers out there, if you do want to modify that, you can do that here, but it's not something that you necessarily need to do if you want to keep the default behavior. Okay, and lastly, there is the footer section. We have basically the opportunity of adding things to the footer in this section. We can do things like add navigation in the bottom. We could add any number of styling, maybe social media logos, different things like that. So we can place that there as well. Okay, so that's pretty simply how it breaks down. Those are the sections that you'll be working with in this HTML file. And it's important to note that the portal normal is going to be what loads for every single page in a site. Okay, so if you have any experience creating sites in Liferay, every site has sets of pages, and every time we generate a new page, the portal normal is going to be controlling the HTML structure of that. There are other aspects of the portal normal that we can look at as well. Again, we'll go ahead and see this when we build the theme together. Okay, there's going to be a reference to the navigation FTL file, the portal pop-up FTL, and the portlet FTL. So in every theme, there are actually multiple FreeMarker files aside from the portal normal, but they're all being referenced ultimately in the portal normal, which will be our HTML source file. Okay, so the navigation FTL is going to include the navigation, obviously, as you may have already guessed. Okay, and basically we can do a number of things here. We can manually build the HTML structure of our navigation. We can use those tag libs that I talked about a little bit earlier to auto-generate the navigation widget for us. Okay. The portal pop-up and portlet are a little bit different. Those FreeMarker files are for controlling the HTML structure of, again, as you may have guessed, your pop-ups and the portlets or widgets on our pages. Okay. So you can change the HTML structures here. As we mentioned in the second set of videos, you can also add some clay classes, okay, to get a specific style, the lexicon styling for our portlets, for our pop-ups, even for our navigation. And we'll be taking advantage of those as we continue on as well. Okay. Now the way they're included in our portal normal, again, as we'll see here in a minute, is through the include with the full templates path variable, which is set for us by default. I'll show you that in a second, as well as whatever file name needs to be included. Okay, so what this means for us developers is we can basically create new files if we'd like, and we can simply include them in portal normal. So for example, if I wanted to go ahead and take my footer and make it a little bit more extensive, but I don't want all of that FreeMarker code in the portal normal, I don't want to muck it up, I want to keep it clean, okay? I can just simply create a new file called footer.ftl or something like that, and I can include it in the portal normal and then put all of my footer FreeMarker in the footer FTL. Okay, so we're simply referencing it there. It's just simply an HTML source file for us. Now, additionally, there is an init FTL, okay, an init FreeMarker file. And what the init FreeMarker file does, you'll find this in your build. Again, we'll look at this. We'll actually open up the code when we build this together. This is where you will find all of your default variables. So Liferay in the base theme has already given us some of Liferay's API to work with. So if you remember from the previous videos, one of the powers of FreeMarker is that we have the ability to reference Java objects. Okay, this is already in part done for us through the init FTL. There's a lot of mapping going on there. We have some methods, we have some objects that we can reference in our FreeMarker files. And in fact, in the portal normal file are already being referenced. Okay, so we'll go ahead and take a look at that as well. And for any custom variables that we need to add, we can actually go ahead and put those in what's called an init custom FreeMarker file. Okay, The init custom is read at the very bottom of that init file, and we can add any customizations there so that we don't have to mess with the base theme, okay? This will be very important when it comes to our deploy process, because in our deploy process, first we're going to deploy the base theme, so it's gonna be the build folder as we'll see, and then after that, it deploys our changes in our source folder, okay? So we're gonna see that a little bit later as well. So let's take a look at these. I know I just went over a lot of files here. If you haven't seen this before, it might be a bit overwhelming. So let's actually get a visual here. Let's go ahead and build our theme together, and then we can take a look at the actual files. We can open them up, we can take a look, okay? So let's go ahead and hop over here and build this together, okay? Now, just to start, I already have my Liferay instance running, okay? And I already have, let me go ahead and just open this up here. Okay, my exercise is ready to go here. So if you guys remember from the previous videos, our exercises should be in our Liferay folder. If you're on Windows, that will be in your C drive. If you're on Mac, that'll be in your user home. Okay, and we will be in this third section here of our exercises called theme development. Okay, so I'm just gonna open that up, leave it open for reference. Okay, it'll just make things a little bit easier for us. All right, so make sure you have Liferay running. Make sure you have your exercises ready to go. And then lastly, make sure that you have Visual Studio Code open, okay? Again, we'll be using this as we continue on throughout the course. We've added some snippets in one of the earlier set of videos. If you have not set up Visual Studio Code or the snippets, go ahead and do that first, okay? And you'll make sure that we can build the theme together, but not have to code every single line, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and open up our terminal, okay, or command line. All right, I'm gonna open up a new tab here so you can see I have the process running for Liferay. Okay, so open up a new command line, a new terminal, okay? And what we're gonna do is we are going to navigate to our Liferay folder. That's where we're gonna build our new theme together, okay? So go ahead and do cd, and you can do C Liferay, or you can do user home Liferay. Okay. Navigate there. All right, and we're going to use Yeoman here to generate our theme project. Okay, so if you remember, Yeoman and Gulp are the dependencies we're using with the theme generator. Okay, so we can type here yo, and then Liferay dash theme. Okay. All right, and this is going to basically bring us to a number of prompts where we can provide the information for our theme, okay? Now, what we're gonna do for this particular exercise is we're actually going to build one of the existing Liferay themes from scratch, okay? So if you guys have worked with the beta version or the beta builds of Liferay 7.1, or perhaps you've come from an earlier version, you may be familiar with the Fjord theme that our engineers have built in-house that you can access on the Liferay marketplace, okay? So for the Livingston example, we're gonna go ahead and create a bit of a modified version of that, and we're just simply gonna call it the Livingston Fjord theme, okay? So let's go ahead and do that. Type in Livingston, okay? And then Fjord theme. So for this first section here, this is just normal English. This is what our theme will be called in the GUI once we have deployed it. Okay, so go ahead and hit enter. Okay, once we've hit enter, all right, you will see the ID here. It's gonna be similar to the name of the theme, but it's gonna be an actual ID, okay? So you'll see that we have a default there. We actually don't need to retype that out. We can just go ahead and hit enter again. All right, for this version, obviously we're gonna be working with 7.1, so go ahead and select 7.1. Go ahead and hit enter for the default free marker here. All right, and it's gonna go ahead and build our theme project together. All right, so give that a minute or so. Okay, it's gonna be bringing in the dependencies. It's gonna be building our build folder, okay? All right, the next thing it's gonna ask here is it's gonna ask us to connect to our app server directory, okay? So we can find this, okay, in the same place where we obviously started Liferay. Okay, so if you go to C Liferay or user home Liferay, and then you go into the Liferay bundle. Okay? And then you go into the Tomcat folder. This is the path that we want. So if you're on Windows, you can just copy that path and paste it on in there. For those of us on OS X here, we can actually just go ahead and drag the folder into the terminal and then hit enter. This will help us to deploy our theme to our app server using the gulp commands. Okay, so we'll get to that in a little bit once we are ready to deploy. Okay, and the last thing here is going to be the URL. So since we're working with just a dev vanilla version of Liferay, it should be on localhost 8080. Again, for those of you who did set up, if you needed to change the port number, make sure that that's reflected here. Okay. Otherwise, go ahead and just hit enter for the localhost 8080, and we will have our theme build ready. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and open that up. You guys can feel free to do that with me as well. I'm gonna go ahead and click on the add here. Again, I can just open a new tab. If you're on Windows, feel free to just open up a new window there as well. Okay. I'm gonna go to my user home and Liferay. All right, and we should see our Livingston Fjord theme here. Okay, so go ahead and open that up. All right, right now we have our node module dependencies and we have our source. We do not have that build folder yet that I mentioned earlier. So we can get it in a couple of ways. We can either run a gulp build, and what this will do is it will just simply build the theme for us and give us the file that we can deploy. Or we can run gulp deploy, and gulp deploy is going to both build it and deploy it to the app server that we set. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and just do a gulp deploy. All right, so come back to your terminal or command line. Okay. Make sure you navigate to the new theme. Okay, so we were previously in the Liferay folder. Go ahead and navigate to the Livingston Fjord theme. Okay. And we can go ahead and run gulp deploy. All right. And you'll see it's deploying, and in the background here, we have our build folder and a dist folder being created. Okay, the build folder is going to include the base theme, and the dist folder is going to include the file that we can deploy. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the build folder here. Let me just go ahead and open this up. All right, this will include our base theme. Okay, so like I've mentioned, the styled base theme, which is going to be the default here, is going to include all of our base files as well as our clay base, which we can use to take advantage of some of those clay components. And if we want to modify those clay components, we can actually do that in the theme as well. Okay. So for now, we're going to focus just on the HTML files here. We'll look at the other ones a little bit later. Okay. But if I open up templates, okay, we will see the portal normal here. That's the default HTML source file that we're talking about, as well as some of the other files that I've mentioned. Okay. So let's go ahead and take a look at a couple of these here. I'm going to go ahead and drag portal normal into the Visual Studio Code. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and change this to be HTML. Give some highlighting here so it looks a little bit nicer. Okay. All right, and there's some things on top here. You'll see some classes that are found in the init FTL. We're going to go ahead and just skim over that for now. You could feel free to do some mapping with those in the init FTL if you'd like. Okay, but otherwise they're just basically giving us some initial styling as well as some of the actual taglibs or macros being used to run different aspects of the page, such as the control menu up top. Okay. All right. This breaks down in the three ways that I mentioned before. There is within this wrapper div a header, a content section, and a footer. Okay, like I mentioned, the header includes a number of things here like the logo, the site name, the site URL. Okay, you'll see that these are all variables that are already being used. Okay, so if in the base theme you see a FreeMarker variable, you should assume that you can find those variables for the most part in the init FTL. Okay. All right, so we have some of those things here. We have a sign-in URL if you are not signed in. Okay, so that's an example of those if statements that we were talking about earlier with FreeMarker. And then we have an if statement here that gives us our navigation FTL. So we are including the navigation FTL in the header here. Okay. All right, the content section here. This if statement is going to be that section I mentioned that allows us to see the layout and the portlet styling. Okay, and you can actually see that here. It's including the portlet FTL. Okay. And then the footer is just pretty simple here. It's a new section that has a, by default, powered by Liferay. Okay, so this can of course be modified, and we will modify that here soon. Okay. All right, if I wanted to look at some of these other files here, for example, the init FTL, okay, you'll see here that there's a number of variables that are being assigned. Okay, we're taking advantage of, like I said, some of those Java objects and their methods. Okay, so I'm not going to go into every single thing here, but there are some things that we are taking advantage of. And most importantly, as I mentioned before, if I come all the way to the bottom, oops, okay, you'll see here that we have our include for our custom init. Okay, so for every custom variable that we want to create, we can go ahead and place those in our init custom, and we can be sure that in the deploy process, it will read our custom variables, and we can use those throughout the rest of our theme. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close those up. Okay. The next thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and add a structure for our source folder in our theme. Okay. So let's go ahead and do that together. I'm going to go ahead and open up my theme. Okay, so I just went to the build folder. If you did that with me, go ahead and go back to the main Livingston Fjord theme folder here. Okay, and we will see our source folder. Okay, if I open up the source folder, by default, there is a CSS folder and there is the web.inf, which is where we have some of our configuration files. Okay, let's go ahead and add the remaining folders here, okay, that we will need to go ahead and modify. All right. Now, typically for a normal process, okay, we're going to obviously be doing some snippets and things like that to speed up the process so that you can get a holistic view of how this theme development works. But in real life, what you would do is you would go to the build folder, you would find whatever folder and files you want to modify, and then you would copy those into source and modify them there. Okay. So we're going to be creating some of these things from scratch. We're going to be referencing our exercises files to be able to have some pre-set up files for us, making this entire process easier. But keep that in mind when you're doing your own theme development, you'll want to reference that build folder and take whatever files you need. So for example, if I wanted to modify the portal normal, I would go to build, templates, copy the portal normal file, and then in my source here, I would create a templates folder, paste the portal normal there, and then modify it in my source templates folder. So let's go ahead and create our 3 remaining folders here. We're going to create an images folder, a JavaScript folder, and a templates folder. Okay. So go ahead and create a new folder. Okay, it's going to be a little bit different on Mac or Windows. Okay, but we can go ahead and do that. So it could be file, new folder. You can just right click, do new folder. For this first one, we'll go ahead and name it images. Okay, nice and easy. This will be where our custom images go for the theme. All right, I'll create a new folder here for JavaScript. That's just going to be called JS. That's what you'll see in the build as well. Okay, and then lastly, let's create a templates folder. And this is what we're going to focus on for the remainder of this video. So there are a few things that we can do here. Okay, we can optionally run gulp watch. Okay, for our purposes right now, I'm actually not going to do that. I would prefer to just run gulp deploy. But what gulp watch does is it allows us to make changes and automatically deploy those changes. Okay, as of right now, it's still in the works a bit, so we're going to go ahead and just run gulp deploy. But feel free to test it out if you'd like. You can go ahead and run gulp watch by in your command line, running it from your themes folder. Okay. Otherwise, we are going to basically start modifying some of our templates here. We're going to start by setting some variables that we'll come back to and talk about later. And then we'll go ahead and use those variables and modify some of our HTML source. Okay, so again, this will give us a baseline for our theme, and then we can move forward and make changes to our CSS and our JavaScript, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and open up, again, make sure you have your exercises readily available. Okay, so I came back over here to my tab with the exercises and 03 theme development. I'm gonna open up the 01 generating a theme here and exercise source. Okay. All right, so to start, I'm gonna go ahead and open up the web.inf folder here. Okay. And I'm gonna go ahead and just copy the Liferay look and feel.xml. All right, again, we'll come back to this later, but this is setting some theme settings for us that we will turn into variables, and I'll show you how to do that a little bit later on. Okay, this just gives us a good starting point for the Fjord theme. Come back to the source of our theme, again, so just make sure you have that available as well. Open up the web.inf folder. Okay. And we're gonna go ahead and replace the Liferay look and feel.xml with the one from our exercises. Okay, so go ahead and paste it in there and replace the original file. All right. Okay, we can go ahead and in our theme, go back up to the source folder here where we should see all of our new folders. All right, the next thing we're gonna do is we're going to take the files that we wanna modify from actually our exercise source, okay? Again, in real life, you would wanna do this from build. You would go to build, choose which files you wanna modify and bring those into source. But to make things a little bit easier for us, we're gonna go ahead and work with the pre-set up exercise source files here, okay? All right, so go ahead and click on the exercise source here again and open up the exercise source templates folder. All right, and just go ahead and copy all of those files. And we'll go ahead and open up and do some modification here. Okay, so copy those, come over to source and templates. Okay, again, source templates is in our Livingston Fjord theme. And just go ahead and paste those files in our source templates folder. Okay. All right, so to start, what we're gonna do is we are going to modify our portalnormal.ftl, okay? We have some things that are already done, okay? And we will just reference those in Portal Normal, okay? So we have navigation, we have the portlet, okay? We have a couple of other ones that we've created, social media and footer navigation. We will come back to some of these a little bit later on, okay? But as a starting point, let's go ahead and take the Portal Normal FTL file and drag it into our Visual Studio Code. Okay. All right, now the reason we're using these files is because we have some snippet sections that we can work with. And we wanted to do this so it's a little bit easier to explain what's going on in the actual theme. Okay. So let's go ahead and you can highlight within the wrapper this first section called Insert Snippet 01 Portal Normal Header here. Okay. All right. Now the nice thing about Visual Studio Code is we can go ahead and just type LFR to replace that, and we can use that first snippet that says Portal Normal Header. Okay. So go ahead and hit Enter once you see that. All right, and this gives us our header. Okay. So this is pretty straightforward for the most part. Okay, we're using some of the same things that we had in the default Portal Normal, but we've added a couple of classes here for responsive design. Okay, so we're using the container fluid class. You should be familiar with those if you've worked with Bootstrap before. Okay. Otherwise, some of these things are pretty much the same. We still have our logo, our site URL, our site name, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. All right, we have this here. We've also included a button section here with some icons. Okay, this is for the HTML structure to be responsive if we are in a mobile view of the site, and I can show you what this looks like. We have a couple of icons that can be opened up, and we're using some of our classes for the nav bar that we set in the Liferay look and feel.xml. So again, we'll come back to those classes later, but the idea here is in the HTML structure when we are in a mobile format, we will have the menu switch to these little icons, and then a user can open up the menu from there. So you've probably seen that kind of look and feel before when you've gone to certain sites on a mobile device. Okay. And lastly, we have our include here for our navigation.ftl. Okay, so pretty straightforward for our header section. Okay. All right, and for this second section here, for the main content section, we can go ahead and highlight our snippet comment here for 02 portal normal main. Go ahead and type LFR and select portal normal main. Okay. All right, we can go ahead and save this here. Again, this gives us the main content section here. There's actually no major changes here. We didn't do anything different from the portal normal, okay? But this shows us this main section here with that if section that I had mentioned a little bit earlier. All right, and then for the final section here, we can go ahead and highlight the insert 03 portal normal footer. Okay, type LFR like we did before, and choose that third footer section. Okay. All right, now this is actually very different from what we had before. Okay, in our footer section, we've added an ID and a role. We've added some div classes here. We'll actually come back to this later. But the idea is in the footer, what we will have is a navigation. Okay, and you can see that here with the include, the if statement for the include footer navigation. We will add some social media things here later, but we'll talk about that full process from top to bottom in a later section. Okay, and then we still have a powered by sort of style here, okay, with a link. All right, and the link will say Livingston Hotels and Resorts, but we're a little bit sneaky here. If you actually click the link, it will take you to our training page. Okay. All right, so this gives us a little bit to work with here. It's a little bit changed, modified. We've added some classes again, using some of those container fluid classes, different things like that for our responsive design. We're already using some Bootstrap and Clay classes in our FreeMarker files. Okay. So when you're done with that, you can go ahead and save the portal normal file here. Okay. All right. And then what we want to do is we want to go ahead and go back to our theme here. And since we are adding the include in our portal normal for the footer navigation, we want to go ahead and make sure that we have everything we need in the footer navigation as well. Okay, so go ahead and open up your theme source templates folder if you don't already have it open. Okay, and go ahead and drag that into the Visual Studio Code editor. Okay. All right, you'll see here for this, we have basically a unordered list. Okay, we're using some classes here and roles to make it fit in a menu. All right. Like I said, we'll go ahead and come back to the social media aspects of the footer a little bit later on. Okay, but for here, we want to highlight that we have a footer nav sign in and a footer nav menu. Okay, so this will make it so that when users are not signed in, there will be a signed in link in the footer. And there will also be a menu of pages as well. Okay, so go ahead and highlight the fourth snippet section here. So it'll be right at the top. Okay, you can go do LFR again and find the 04 footer nav sign in section. And we can save that here. All right, like I said, this is pretty straightforward. It's basically saying if you're not signed in, show a sign in URL. Okay. And these are using some variables that are set in the initFTL as well. Okay, so that's one thing we can do. We could also do this in the header. We could do this pretty much anywhere if we wanted to, but we've just decided in this case for the Fjord theme that we want to set that up for the footer. Okay. All right, and then go ahead and highlight that fifth section. Back up, edit, edit. All right, we're gonna go ahead and add the fifth snippet section here. And we're gonna go ahead and do LFR again and find the fifth snippet. Okay. Now this is using the for each loop for our navigation items. And the reason for this is because we don't obviously want to identify every specific static page if our pages are going to be flexible in any given site. Okay. So this allows us to loop through all of the existing pages, okay, to get that information and to put them on display using some of the nav item variables that are found in the init FTL. Okay. All right, so these are some basic changes for our FreeMarker HTML base. Okay. Again, we'll come back to doing some HTML changes when we look at configuring our theme, but we can go ahead and deploy these changes and take a look at the simple base theme with our simple changes. Okay. So go ahead and open up your command line or terminal, okay, and run a gulp deploy from the base Livingston Fjord theme folder. Okay. All right, and again, this is going to build and deploy our new theme. Okay. All right, so once you've done that, we can go ahead and hop on over to our Liferay site that should be running. Okay. All right, so I have it up and running. I need to go ahead and sign in. So if you want to do that, you can do that with me. Click sign in here. Okay. All right, and if you remember from the earlier videos, we created a admin here called Josiah Copeland. Actually, let me just go ahead and erase this. Okay, so it's josiah.copeland@livingston.com. And the password that I set was test. All right, so let's go ahead and open that menu at the top left. Open build in the site administration panel and click pages. Okay. All right, so when we set a theme, we're setting it up on the set of pages for a specific site. Okay. So to do this, we can go ahead and click on the options menu at the top right and configure. Okay. Go ahead and scroll down here and you will see an option that says change current theme. Okay, so go ahead and click on change current theme. All right, and you should see a blank section here called Livingston Fjord theme. So go ahead and choose that. All right, that is our starting theme, and go ahead and click save. Okay. All right, once you've done this, go ahead and click on Go to Site in the Site Administration panel. And here we'll go ahead and take a look at the HTML changes. And that's pretty much it. We haven't added any styling yet. We haven't done anything more fancy. So we're just going to see our HTML changes here. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close the menu here. And we'll see here that we have some basic changes here. Okay, the hello world right now is all the way across. We have a footer down here. You'll see the powered by Livingston Hotels and Resorts and our icon. We obviously need to add some styling here to make this look a little bit nicer. So that's where we are headed next. Okay. All right, so let's just recap here what we've talked about in this particular section. Okay. For our overall global styling, we will be building and deploying a theme, and we can control the HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and images for the theme. Okay. All right, the base themes are going to be our starting point for our themes. Okay, and the underscore styled base theme is going to include that clay base. So it's going to give us the clay implementation that we can use and modify. Okay. If we want to import existing Liferay theme projects into our NPM process, we can use that Liferay theme import. Okay. But for our purposes right now, the portal normal FTL is going to be the main source file for our HTML. And as we'll see a little bit later on, our custom SCSS and main.js are going to be the main source files for CSS and JavaScript. And then we can also modify the Liferay look and feel XML for some settings that we can add to the platform as well. Okay. So we'll go ahead and continue on here in the next few videos, and we'll take a look at adding CSS, JavaScript, and we'll add some configuration and themelets as well.